Okay. Good morning, everybody. With the help, morning, Tzvika, you might want to mute yourself. Okay, let's start. With the help of Hashem Yisborach, we are going to be learning today Daf Chof Aleph in the Shabbos. I dedicate today's learning to a Refuah Shalema Kreva, to Harav Avram Meir ben Rivka, to our friend Yisrael Avadia ben Rachel, another friend of ours, Lev Yitzchak ben Rivka. They should all have a complete recovery speedily, and specifically for the rabbi, we miss him very much, and I definitely miss him more than most at this point because I'm a little bit out of my element learning, teaching the shiur, but I'm doing the best I can, and I appreciate the little leeway that you guys are giving me, and please comment on and jump in if there's anything that I say that doesn't make sense or there are any mistakes, because I'm sure there are some. That being said, we are going to start from Tanach Rabbanan at the two dots on the top of Chof Aleph Amud Aleph. Tanach Rabbanan. Call, and just let me refresh where we were up to. Just in general, we started the Perek talking about the Mishnah discussed substances that you cannot use as wicks for fire on Shabbos, and substances that you cannot use as fuel for fire on Shabbos. And the general understanding is that the issue with all these substances is that they don't light well. And if you have a wick made of a substance that doesn't catch fire well, it will lead to you manipulating the fire. You're going to tilt it. You're going to do something to it on Shabbos, which will cause you to be over an Isser D'Oraisa. So that's, or as it relates to the fuel, if it doesn't catch well, you're going to stoke the coals, what we talked about. There was this idea of moving the fuel around to try to get it to catch, and that would be an Isser D'Oraisa. So therefore, there is these different fuels and these different materials. We are told it's usher to use them to make a fire, even if, by the way, your fire, which we're saying obviously, is being lit on Friday. So that's what we discussed in the Mishnah, and we're picking up the discussion about these materials, and then on Daf on Amud Beis, we are going to get into the whole exciting topic of Hanukkah. Okay, Tanach Rabbanan. Kol elu she'amru ein madlikin behen b'Shabbos. All these substances, which we said you're not allowed to light from them on Shabbos, aval oisem behen midura. You could make a large fire. You want to make a big torch or a bonfire. With that, you could use them, right? So you can't use them for wicks, but you can use them for a large fire. Whether you're using the fire just as a source of warmth, or whether you're using it for its light. Bein al gabi karka, bein al gabi kiro, whether it's on the ground, whether it's on a stove. The prohibition had to do with making wicks out of these materials, because if you have a fire or a candle with these wicks, and you're using that presumably to read or to, you will come to tilt the lamp so that the wick, which doesn't catch well with these materials, that's what you'll do, and you'll be over on Shabbos. So that's what it tells us. One of the materials or the substances that the Mishnah says you cannot use is something called kick oil. So my shemen kick, what is this kick oil? Amar Shmuel, Shealtinu l'chol l'choyse yama v'amrali. He asked all the sailors about what's this shemen kick, and what they said was, "Oif echad yesh krake hayam, who kick the kick shmoy." There's a bird that's found in these seaport cities, and it's called the kick. So it's a type of oil that comes from the bird, and that's why it's called kick oil. Another opinion, Rabbi Yitzchak Breder Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Mishcha Dekaza. Kick is cottonseed oil. We all know cottonseed oil because many people use it on Pesach. So that is called kick oil, and it's apparently a fuel that doesn't burn well, which is why you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos. Rabbi Yitzchak Breder Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Mishcha Dekaza. I'm sorry, Reish Lakish Amar. Reish Lakish says, Kikoyan Diyaina, that actually this kick is an oil that comes from a type of tree called the kikoyan, and we all are familiar with the kikoyan because that is the tree that in the story of Yaina, right? He fell asleep, and Hashem had this tree that grew over him and gave him shade, and then it withered, and he was sad. And so that is called the kikayan. So apparently this tree has a certain amount of some sort of oil that comes from it. And those are the three opinions on kick oil. Either it's from a bird, or it's a cottonseed oil, or it is from the kikayan. Amar Rabba Bar Chana. Rabba Bar Chana says, L'didi tazi li kikayan diyayna. I myself have seen a kikayan, the litz Laliva dummy. It resembles a litz Laliva, a different type of, some sort of plant, okay? I'm not even gonna attempt to pronounce it. Umi dif, Danielle, you have a picture of the Litzliva plant? Maybe not, I don't know. The Umi dif.
Only the cancer plant, sorry.
Umi dif shike rave, and it grows in like swamps. Valpum chanusa madlon yase. And well, it's a plant that merchants, store owners would often hang it in their stores, both for shade and for the smell, the fragrance that it would give. Umi partzidohi of the mishcha, from its kernels of this plant, they make oil. Anpohi naichon chobriche de marava, and under its branches, that's where all the people that were not well in Eretz Yisrael, they would rest. Excuse me. They would rest under the branches of this this bush, and that is what is the koyan. So that's the one that they would make the oil out of. Okay, moving forward. Amar Rabba. The wicks that the Chachamim told us, they cautioned us not to use them, not to light fires from those wicks on Shabbos. It's because the flame flickers on them. It doesn't catch well. So the oil or the fuels that the Mishnah lists off that you cannot use them on Shabbos, they're not drawn easily to the wick. So it's in either cases, whether it's the wick, whether it's the fuel, the problem with the wick is that it doesn't catch the fire well, and the problem with the fuel is that it doesn't, it's not drawn to the wick. Either way, the fear is that you're going to tilt the lamp in order to improve the fire, improve the light, which would be usher on Shabbos. Abaye asked the question from his Rebbe, Rabba. These oils, which the Chachamim said you cannot light from them on Shabbos, mahu sheyitin l'soichen shemon shel kol shuhu b'yadlik. What about if you take one of these band oils, like the kick oil, but then you add into it an acceptable oil, you add into it a mutter oil. So mi gazrinan dilma osi ladluke beinayu. do they make a gzera against adding the good oil to the bad oil because we're afraid that then you will then make a fire using only the bad oil, or not? So Amarle ein madlikin. Rabba answered Abaya, nisht. We are not able to use a mixture even of the permissible oil with the non-permissible. My timer was the reason. Amazing answer. Rabba says, lefi she'ein madlikin. You don't do it because we don't do it. So even a small amount of oil was not allowed. Yeah, there's a, let me see, I think Taisvis asks over here, actually no, a little further. Okay, so lefi she'ein madlikin. Esvei. Abaya asks a question to Rabbah. It says, Korach davar shemadlikin boy, al gabi davar she'ein madlikin boy. If you took a substance that you're allowed to make a wick out of, and you wrapped it around a substance that you're not allowed to make a wick with. So you took, I don't know, let's say cotton, and you wrapped it around the fibers from the inside of the bark of the tree, right? So what's the deal? Can you use that for a wick or not? So, ein madlikin boy, we do not use such a wick. You're not allowed to. But then it says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, shall base Abba in my father's house, hayu kirchin psila al gabi egos. They would take a wick and wrap it over a nut, madlikin, and they would light it. So it seems that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying that you could take a mixture of the two substances, the permissible and the non-permissible, make it into one wick and use it. They used to do it in his father's house. So Katani Miyaz Madlikin, the Bryce stated that the Pashas that in actuality, right, Rabbi Gamliel's family would do it. So is the Chashayla, you just said that we can't. It seems like Rabbi Gamliel's family would. So now let's just stop here for a second. There's a Shaila based on Rabbi Gamliel. Why can't we just say, what's the question? Rabbi Gamliel says you could. The Tanakh says you can't. And Rabbah is instructing him like the Tanakh, which says that you can't. So that's the initial question that you're gonna be hit with. So the answer is that when it brings an actual story, halacha l'maisa, you know that he did it, right? It's not just like a theoretical, okay, this guy says yes, this guy says no. He's telling a story that his family actually did it, so it seems that was a permissible way of going about it, and therefore the practicality of the fact that Rabbi Gamliel's family did it, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and his father, they did this, so then it seems like halachically that is what was permissible. And clearly we know that it's not. So Amrle, Rabba answered Tabaya, Admoisvat li midrabon Shimon begamliel. Sign the Tanakama. So he says, instead of asking me on Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, like I just mentioned, you could just give me you could support me from the Tanakama, because that goes according to my opinion. So and for the Gemara, Haloi Kasha, it's really not. It's not a question. Maisa Rav, he's saying that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, this was an actual Maisa Rav. So therefore, that was the actual halacha. He actually did it. So it's Mikal Makan Kasha. It's a kasha. My lav lahavik. Why would he allow him to light this mixture of the two substances when clearly he said, you told me that's not allowed. So
sorry, what's that mem stand for?
Mikal Makan.
Mikol Makom, thank you.
Okay. Loi. So Rabbah responds to Abaya. Loi. Lahakvois. He did not. You're misunderstanding the whole situation with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel did not take a nut and wrap fibers that were permissible around the nut and make a single wick out of it. He used the nut only as a floating device. I don't know if any of you guys have ever used in your menorah back in the old days, these things called floating wicks, right? It's a little round piece that's made of like the same material that like corks are made of, right? It floats. And then there's a hole in it. You put the wick in there and it keeps the wick floating on the top of the oil. So that is exactly what the house of Rashbag was doing. They were using the nut as a floating device to hold the wick up in the fuel, but they were not mixing the two substances into a single wick. So then it says, if he was just using it as a floating wick, my time is the Tanakama. Why would the Tanakama answer it? Anybody would allow you to use a nut as a floating substance for the wick. So the Gemara is going to revise the whole brisa that we learned and reinterpret it for us. Kulon Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The entire brisa is in fact Rashbag. Okay, it's missing. You have to understand it's as if it's missing a few words, and this is where you have to read it. Someone wrapped a substance that you're allowed to make wicks from. Al gabe davar she'ein madlikin boy, on something that you're not allowed to be madlik with. Ein madlikin boy. You're not allowed to do it, and that goes along with what Rabbi Paskin. That goes along with our understanding. You cannot do. Amed varma murim. When do we say this? Lahadlik, only if you're using the two substances, dafka, to make a single wick out of the two substances. However, if you're just using the other substance in order to float the wick, not to actually intertwine it in the actual wick. So, Rav Shimon Gamliel, Oimer, shall base Abba, what? Abba lahakvois mutter. Use it as a floating device, your mutter, and so says Shimon Gamliel Oimer, Rashbag would say, so base Abba hayu korchim tila al gabi egais. In my father's house, they would actually float the wick with a nut, and that's where you learn the brisa. So, Frag the Gemara, Aini, is it in fact so that you cannot add an invalid substance, an invalid fuel to a valid fuel? Amarav Bruna, Amarav Bruna says in the name of Rav, Chelev Muhuta Vikirbe Dogim Shini Moichu Adam Laisim L'Sayche Shemen Kol Shuhu Umadlik. If you have melted fat, okay, or if you have fish innards that have been dissolved or liquefied, okay, a person can put a small amount of that with a small amount of valid oil into that and then light it. So now what do we see? We see Rav is saying clearly that you are allowed to mix fuels that are allowed with fuels that are not allowed, meaning the melted fat and the fish innards would be non-permissible fuels, and he's mixing it with permissible fuel, and he says it's allowed. So it's a question on our understanding. Rabbah said that you are not allowed to do this, and now we see from Rav that you could. Side note, I was just wondering this to myself. I don't really understand why this is a question on Rabbah. Rabbah's an Amayra, Rav is an Amayra. Usually, if you have a question, you'd have to ask a question on Rabbah from a Tana, but that's just side note. That's what I was thinking to myself. I don't know the answer to that, but let's just go with it. That is a question. That maybe if Rabbah is saying it, clearly that would be the halacha. I don't know. So Rabbah answers, Hani mimashke beinayu. The two oils that Rav was talking about, right? They are in fact, so let's talk about beef, melted beef fat. These oils actually burn very well. And the ones that I was talking about where you're not allowed to mix them, those are oils that don't burn well. The Gazur Rabbanan al Chelev Muhutach Mishum Chelev She'enu Muhutach. If you remember, we learned in the Mishnah actually in the beginning that there was a machlokes on whether you can use melted beef fat. What it comes down to it is that beef fat that's been liquefied or that's been melted actually functions as a acceptable fuel. The problem is that if it's not melted, it does not work as a acceptable fuel. It doesn't burn well. So the Chachamim were geyser on the melted beef fat up to the non-melted beef fat, right? So in the case where you're blending the oils, right, you're mixing permissible oil with the non-permissible oil. In this case, the non-permissible oil of being the liquefied fish innards or the liquefied beef fat, these substances on their own actually burn well. So it's like exera, ligzera, and we don't make exera, ligzera, right? So the only reason you don't use liquefied fish innards is why? Mishum kirvei dagim shaloim nimaychu. It's because you might try and use fish innards that are not liquefied and they're not dissolved. The ligs are nami chedem muhuta v'kirvei dagim shinimaychu shenasa l'techen shemen mishum chedem muhuta v'kirvei dagim shinimaychu. So then it says, well, why don't you make a gzeira on the liquefied fat and the liquefied fish innards? Ought to, because of, you might, then come to the next one. So that's why you shouldn't even be allowed to make a blended combination of mutter oil together with the beef fat or the liquefied fish innards. So the Gemara, I'm sorry, Rabbi answers, which you should not be able to put in oil. And we just said, Rav said that you could. So Rabbi answers, he gufa gzera, that this whole prohibition on the beef fat, that's a gzera. Should we then go ahead and make a gzera l'gzera? Everybody knows the standard rule is you make a gzera of the rabban. Every issa d'rabbanan is to prevent you from being over an issa d'iraisa. But they do not make a gzera l'gzera. So all of these oils, the regular oils that you're not allowed to use, the issue is that you might come to tilt it, right? And if you come to tilt it, then you're going to be, you tilted on Shabbos, you're going to be over the Isser Da'iraisa. Therefore, you're not allowed to use them. But in this case, where the liquefied fat, inherently, it works well. So you're not going to be worried about the tilting, right? But the only issue is, so therefore, there's no gzera that you can't have a combination of the oil together with the liquefied fat. Now, a couple of notes on this topic, right? Taisvus asks that with the melted beef tallow, it seems like that is already a gzera, right? Because we're saying that the melted beef fat, it in itself burns well. The only reason you don't use it is because you might come to use the non-melted beef fat. And the only reason you won't use the non-melted beef fat is you might come to manipulate the fire on Shabbos. So it seems like melted beef fat in and of itself is already a gzera, and we just said that they don't make gzeras. So it's a good question. You guys hear the question? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So there were two answers given. I would say humbly that I don't fully understand them that well, but answer number one is that when this fear of tilting the lamp on Shabbos, it's not that you might come to do it. This answer says you're going to vadai do it. If you make a fire with non-melted beef tallow or any of these other substances, you're for sure going to tilt it on Shabbos. So that's not even considered a gzera. You're not allowed to do it because if you do it, you're going to end up for sure tilting it. So in this case, not using the liquefied is only a single gzera. That's one answer. You can think about it. The second answer that I heard is it's a totally different approach, and it says that we're not concerned, about the tilting the lamp. It's not about that. We all know, we trust everybody. Shabbos, if the lamp is not burning well, it's going to go out, and we're not worried you're going to come and be over an Issur D'Oraisa for tilting. But what's going to happen is your fire is going to burn out. And if your fire burns out, we all know that on Shabbos, the whole point of Shabbos candles, of having light in your house, is for shalom bayis. And if the fire burns out, you're not going to have shalom bayis. So the gzeira of the melted fat, so that you shouldn't use the non-melted fat. It's nothing to do with Iber and Issa Dairaisa. This is just good advice because we're worried, the Chachamim were worried about Jewish families having good shalom bayis on Shabbos, and therefore they didn't want the fire to go out. So that is where it comes from. So that's why it's not really, it doesn't fit into the whole concept of Zera. One more thought or one more note on the whole concept of Zera is there's a machlokes in Rishonim whether this whole concept of Zera, if it is just stam like a logical concept, or if it's actually sourced biblically. And there's a pasuk that they bring down where it does seem to be that it could be, and some opinions hold that it is mamish midaraisa, not that it's sourced in the Torah, okay? And if it's sourced in the Torah, then the difference between that versus it just being a svara is that in such a case, the Chachamim really are not allowed to make a gzera, okay? Versus if it's just a conceptual, logical, good piece of advice, then they would be able to make exceptions as they see fit. Remember, the svara of gzera is really like ein la davar side. I'm going to say you can't do this because you might come that, and then maybe you should do another level, and then another level. It will never end. So that's the two sides of gzera. And let's go further. All right. So we answered this entire situation that actually the melted beef fat inherently was a good burning fuel. All right. Tani Rambam Bar Chama. Rambam Bar Chama taught a brisa. Silois ushmanim she'amru chachamim ein madlikin behem b'Shabbos, ein madlikin behem b'Mikdash. You're not allowed to use them in the Beis HaMikdash. Shenemar lahalois ner tamid, because it says lahalois ner tamid. Hu tani la v'hu amar la. Rambam Bar Chama he taught it, and then he explained it himself. Kedei shetehei shall have as oila me'elo lahalois. Me'ileha lahalois. So the word lahalois, right, is to teach kadesh shall have us oila me'ileha v'shaloi v'loi shetei oila ayidei davar acher. It should go up on its own. The wicks and the oils, it should ascend by itself and not by another means. And if we use any of these other substances in the Beis HaMikdash, you're going to have to manipulate it or work with it in order to get it to catch, and therefore you're not allowed to use it in the Beis HaMikdash. Everyone will ask, well, we all know that the only fuel that was used in the Beis HaMikdash for the menorah was shemen zayazah. So what's this brisa telling you can't use? Gabe, if you can mute your phone, that would be good. What are they saying here that that you can't use these fuels? Of course you can't use the fuels. They only used shemen zayas. So there's various answers that are given, but the easiest one for me to understand was that, okay, the menorah used shemen zayas, fine, but there were other lights in the Beis HaMikdash. There was, they had the hallways, they had the different areas, and in those areas, there were other lights, torches, whatever it might be, that used wicks. So you might think that in those places you could use these other fuels. So the Brisa teaches us, no, you cannot. Okay, weiter. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Mibloi michse kaihanin, umehem yonehem, hoyu mafkian, umehem adlikin. The worn out clothing of the kahanim and their belts, right? They would tear them up and they would make wicks out of them. And those wicks, they would light them. So the question is that we already learned that the two of the substances that you're not allowed to use for wicks are what? Wool and hair. Remember, those were added, what we were learning before, right? Those were added as two of the banned substances. And yet here, they're making wicks out of the Big Day Kahuna. The Big Day Kahuna, we all know the belts were made of wool and linen. So how were they able to do it? And for the Gemara, Simchas Beis Hashayeva Shani. Okay, guys, when it said that they were using the belts of the Kahanim, which were made of wool, they were not using it for the wicks of the menorah. They were using it only for the Simchas Beis Hashayeva. Simchas Beis Hashayeva was the big celebration where they were making the big fire by the Mizbeach, and they were making the torches, and they were dancing around. So in that instance, they were allowed to use the wicks because it wasn't, I guess it wasn't such, there were maybe bigger fires, and it wasn't an issue to use the wool in those wicks. Okay, a couple of points on this concept of Sichos Beisher Eva. There's the Taisva of Sichos Beisher Eva has a lot of, I think, quite fascinating points that it brings out. So first of all, question is, you're only allowed to use the Big Day Kahuna, okay, specifically for L'Tzerech Karban, right? If you're not using L'Tzerech Karban, you're being moil on Hegdish, right? So how could they have used it for Simchas Beisher Eva? Simchas Beisher Eva is not L'Tzerech Karban. That's not, so the Re answers, no. The whole point of Simchas Beisher Eva was specifically L'Tzerech Karban, right? He says, okay, so and then so first of all, that's question one, that's that answer. Then he also says that the fire from Sichos Beisher Eva was so bright, and it lit up the entire surrounding area that women were able to check their wheat from the light of the fire coming out of the Sichos Beisher Eva. So you ask the question, how were the women allowed to check the wheat kernels using the light? That seems like Me'ila. You're using the light of the fire from the Sichos Beisher Eva. So he answers, Taisvis answers that that it didn't mean that they actually used the light to check the wheat. It said the light was bright enough that they could check the wheat. Okay, that's one answer. But the Yerushalmi is dayak from here, okay, that actually there's no Isra Me'ila on just using something for sight or smell. Okay, that's not called being moil. And the raya is from here that the women would taka check their wheat using the light of the Sichos Beisher Eva. Okay? Okay. Weiter. Tashma. The Tani Rabba Bar Masna, Big Dik Kahuna Shabalu, Mafkin Oisan, Umehena Hayu Oisim Chilas Amigdash. That the worn out clothes of the base of the Kahanim, they would tear them and they'd make wicks for them. So my lav deklayim, isn't this a mixture of linen and wool? And we learned that, and so it seems like they did taka use wicks from the Beis Hamikdash, from the Big Day Kahuna. And we just answered, right, that they did not use it for wicks, they only used it for the Simchas Beisher Eva. And for the Gemara, loy the butz. The Big Day Kahuna that were used for wicks were only made from the priestly garments that were exclusively made of linen. Okay, the belt, which was made of wool and it was made of linen, right? That was used for Simchas Beisher Eva, and therefore it's no stira. Another question that I think Taisus mentions is that even if it's wool and linen, didn't we learn before that when you have a mixture of two, essentially it's permissible, right? The only reason you don't use it on Shabbos, right, is a gzeira that you might come to do it exclusively with the non-permissible substance, right? But why should that matter for the Beis Hamikdash? This is not an Isser of Shabbos, okay? They only used it from the Big Day Kahuna. So the Big Day Kahuna, they're made of linen, or the belts, which were made of wool and linen. You're not going to have a chash that now you're going to come to use something else. You're only using the Big Day Kahuna, right? You hear the question? So the answer that's brought down in Taish is that no, the belt of the Kohanim, they were majority wool. It was, I think, 3 portions wool to 1 portion linen. So in such a case, it's not even considered like a mixture because it's roiv is wool, so it's like it's bottle the linen. You have to consider like it's totally wool. That's why you would not be able to use that for the wicks. It's not even considered like a mixture. It's considered like almost exclusively wool. Okay, moving forward. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, I'm sorry, these, and this is, by the way, the beginning of we're starting to get into Hanukkah. The wicks and the oils, which we said you're not allowed to use for Shabbos, you also cannot use for Hanukkah, bein b'Shabbos, bein b'chol. So you're not allowed to light it on your menorah, whether it's weekday or whether it's Shabbos. Amar Rava says, my time at the Rav Huna, what's the reason why you cannot use these wicks or fuels, which we say the whole issue is that they don't light well, they don't catch well, so why can't you use it for your menorah? So it seems kasavar that he holds there's two issues. First of all, kavsa zakukla, there's a concept and there's a machlekes as to whether when you light your menorah, are you chayav to relight it if it goes out, right? So the Rava is saying that clearly from Rav Huna's din, he must hold that if it extinguishes, you must relight it. Otherwise, what would be the issue using one of these lousy fuels? The whole problem with using the lousy fuel is your menorah might go out. If your menorah goes out, you must light it again. And if you don't light it again, you didn't get the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. So because we're afraid that it will go out and he won't relight it, therefore, you're not allowed to use these fuels, right? Otherwise, if he held that you don't have to relight it, if he didn't have to relight it, then he would have no problem using these lousy fuels on Hanukkah during the day. Okay, so and then what about the Shabbos issue? The Shabbos issue, and he holds that it's mutter to use the light of the menorah. Because if it wasn't mutter to use the menorah, the light of the menorah, then who cares if you're using a lousy fuel on Shabbos for your menorah? When I say on Shabbos, meaning when you light your menorah candles Friday before Shabbos, if it's a lousy fuel, right? But it doesn't matter if you're not allowed to use that light anyhow. So clearly, from the fact that Rav Huna says you cannot use these fuels not during the weekday and not on Shabbos, it's a raya that he holds both of these dinim. Number one, kavsa zakukla, if it goes out, you must relight it, right? And the second din is that mutter l'shtamish la'ira, you're allowed to use the light of the menorah. Therefore, on Shabbos, you're concerned that maybe it'll go out or maybe he'll adjust it. Okay. Rav Chizda says, madlikin bahen b'choel, you're allowed to light. You're allowed to use these substances, these lousy fuels and lousy wicks during the weekday. Avaloi b'Shabbos, but you can't use it on Shabbos. So kasavar, this Rav Chizda is obviously of the opinion that kavsa, right? If it went out, ein zakila, you're not obligated to relight it, and therefore you could even use lousy fuel for your menorah during the week because you're not worried that it's going to go out and then you won't relight it because you don't have to relight it. Okay, and it's permissible to use its light on Shabbos. That's why he holds, Rav Chizda holds, you're not allowed to use these fuels on Shabbos because you're going to be reading by the light of your menorah, and you might come to adjust it because you use lousy fuel, and you'll be over Issa Daraisa. Amrav Zera, Amrav Masna. Rav Zera said in the Amrav Zera, Amrav Masna. The Amrullah, Amrav Zera, Amrav. Some say that he said in the name of Rab. These wicks and oils that the Chacham said, you're not allowed to light from them on Shabbos. You could use them on Chanukah. Bein b'choil, bein b'Shabbos. Whether it's weekday, whether it's Shabbos. So Amrav Yirmiyah, my time at the Rab. What's the reason? Kasavar, he clearly holds Kavsa ein zakukla, that if your menorah goes out, right, you are not obligated to relight it. And he holds that it's usher to use the light of the menorah on ever, right? So you're not allowed to use the light. So therefore, because you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah, there's no fear that if you use a lousy fuel and you're going to tilt it in order to get a better burning, a better flame, because you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos, and therefore, you're not allowed to use it full stop, and therefore, that is why he says you're allowed to use it.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay. So, Amarua Rabbanan Kamed Abaye Mishmei Rav Yirmiyah. They said this explanation, or this psak of Rav Yirmiyah, the way he brought it down from Rav in front of Abaye. But like Kibla, he did not accept it. He's like, yeah, this is not doesn't sound richtig. Anyhow, he also Ravin. When Ravin came from he came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael. So Amrua Rabbanan Kamed Abaye Mishmei Rav Yochanan. He basically said the exact same shtickle Torah that Rav Yirmiyah said. He said this to Abaye in the name of Rav Yochanan, and then the Kibla. At this point, Abaye accepted it, and Omar, he said, "I zechai gemirte shmaite mikara." He says, if only I would have been zeicha to have learned Rav's teachings when I was younger. Right? He's like lamenting the fact that he didn't learn this teaching of Rav until he was older. So, Gemara, he's learning it now. What are you worried that you didn't learn it when you were younger? So the Gemara says, Nafka mina legirsa yankusa. There's a big difference between what you learn when you're a kid versus what you learn when you're older. And there's different explanations as to what that's referring to. But Pashtus, the things that we learn when we're young, we retain them. Rabbi Zions used to always say that in Brazil, in the Hasidic Cheder that he went to as a kid, there was no such thing as you didn't learn what they were teaching you. Because if you didn't learn, they had a way of forcing you to learn it. And these teachings, you got it and it stuck with you. And I think today we could all relate to this, that, there's these various things that we learned when we were kids in Cheder, and it will stick with you the rest of your life. And you learned something last week at our ages, and it's very easy to forget it. Anyhow, so that was the lamenting of Abaye that he didn't learn these Torahs of Rav when he was younger. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to challenge the explanation of Rav and the explanation of Rav Chisda. Okay, so what do we say? We said that if you are worried about using the fuel on Shabbos, or the lousy fuel for your menorah over Shabbos, if you're worried about it, then you are probably of the opinion that you're allowed to use the fire of the menorah for your own purposes. And if you're worried about using it during the week, it's because you hold that you have to relight it if it goes out. The Kapsa Ein Zakikla, did Rav and Rav Chisda really hold that if your menorah goes out, you don't have to relight it? Uraminu. But it seems like there's a question from the Brisa, mitzvasa. It says the mitzvah of lighting menorah, right, is mishatishka hachama, from when the sun sets, ad shetichla regel min hashuk, until the time where the people vanish from the marketplace. My lav, the kasva, the ikavsa, hadermadikla. Isn't this telling us that your menorah, isn't it giving us an actual time limit of when your menorah needs to be lit from Shkia until this time of when people are no longer in the marketplace? And obviously, if you need it to be lit for that entire time, well, then if it goes out, you have to relight it because it wasn't lit for that entire time. So the Gemara says, loy. No, that's not the pshat. The e loy adlik madlik. Really, okay, what the Brisa is teaching us is until what time are you able to light menorah? It has nothing to do with you needing it to burn that full duration of shkia till mishatishka until achatichla regel min hashuk. It's just that, hey, when am I able to light menorah? Up to that time of shetichla regel min hashuk. Inami l'shiura. Inami, alternatively, it's giving you a shiur, right, of how much oil, how much fuel you're supposed to put in your menorah. Meaning you're supposed to put an amount that will allow your menorah to burn from Shkia until this time of Tichla Regel Min Hashuk, right? And he says, Ad Tichla Regel Min Hashuk, Ad Kama. How long is that? So Amar Rav Bar Barchana, Amar Rav Yechanan, Ad Dekaya Rigla Tarmadoi. It's until the Tarmadoyan have vanished from the marketplace. So a couple of thoughts on this. This is like a very loaded Gemara in halacha, right? Because so first of all, what does it mean shetishka chama? So actually, I wrote down there's 4 opinions as to when begins the time of when you're supposed to light your menorah. So the Rosh, the Tur, the Mordechay, and I'm sure others, they hold that this shetishka chama is referring to the very, very end of Tishka Chama, which actually is Tzeis HaKechavim, okay? Which is maybe a bit of a strange lashon, but that's the way they pass it. The Rashba and the Ran, they hold that Tishka Chama is referring to about 18 minutes prior to Tzeis HaKechavim. So there's a third opinion, which is the Baha'ag, which is slightly earlier than the position of the Ran and the Rashba. And the earliest time, which is actually the opinion of the Gra, he holds that it's Taka Shkia. So it's the beginning of what we would consider Shkia. That's the time to light the menorah. And those are the 4 positions that are brought down La Halacha. So one more thought is, he says, what was Pshat Acha Tichla Regel Min Hashuk? It says, Adekaya Rigud Tamardoy. The Tamardoyan were these were the people that used to sell the wood. They were not Jewish. And I heard that this is a good raya, that the mitzvah Persume Nisa on Hanukkah, it's not just to spread it out to Jews, but this is the raya that it's actually used to spread it out to non-Jews. And that's why today, as is Minhag Chabad, we all put menorahs on our cars, and we put menorahs in the parks, and we put menorahs in the malls, because we're trying to spread the Persume Nisa is not just, it's to the entire world, Jews and non-Jews alike. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, Mitzvahs Chanukah, Ner Ishu Beisai. Oh boy. The Mitzvah Chanukah is commanded to, it says, Ner Ish Ubeisai. 1 light for a man and his entire household. Mahadrin, those were the Charedish mentioned, right? They would Ner L'chol Echad Ve'echad. They would have 1 light for every person in his family. Mahadrim and Mahadrin, and those who were the uber Charedim, right? Mahadrim and Mahadrin. So they would say Beis Shammai Oimrim Yamrisha Madak Shmoina Mikan Ve'elech Peichas V'Helech. Beis Hillel Oimrim Yamrisha Madak Achas Mikan Ve'elech Ma'aseh V'Helech. And Beis Hillel holds that you actually light 1 on the first day, and each day progressively you light more up until the 8th night, and that is la halacha, the way we paskin, like Beis Hillel, and this is the way we do it today. Just to note, and there's a lot of opinions in these different. What is it? What's pshat ner ishu beisai? What's pshat ner l'kol echad ve'echad? But at the base requirement where it says ner ish beisai, right? So the head of the household, he lights 1 candle. So the Mahadrim and Mahadrim is really is on top of that base halacha, meaning instead of and that's the way we paskin, that really only the head of the household has to light the menorah, but the Mahadrim and Mahadrim, he lights 1 for each night of Hanukkah, as opposed to the so the Mahadrim and Mahadrim is really skipping the Mahadrim level, just to understand that, okay? There's on this on this machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, I thought there was a bit of a pity that I'm giving this shiur and not Rabbi Z, because we all know. So I did a little cheating and I checked with him. So he gave me, just to give over to the shiur, the Rebbe's famous explanation on the difference between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as it relates to this machlokes Chanukah, and it actually, the Rebbe extends it to many machlokes in between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. It has to do with their approach and to how they look at any single thing. Beis Shammai is always looking at the potential, and Beis Hillel looks at the actual. This is why there's a machlokes as to when do we have Rosh Hashanah Leilanos, right? So Beis Shammai holds you do it on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Why? Even though we know that the buds only come out on the 15th of Shvat, right? But they start to grow, right? The seed takes hold on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So therefore, he holds that we do Rosh Chodesh Leilanos on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Beis Hillel says, no. You have to go by not what potentially will be, but what is actually here. And what's actually here, in the case of the trees, it only starts coming out actually on Tu B'Shvat. So that's why we make Rosh Chodesh Leilanos on Tu B'Shvat. Same thing here with the menorah. When you look at the two sides, so Beis Shammai holds on the first night, potentially there's 8 days, so we light 8 on the first. The second is only 7, and he goes that way. Beis Hillel holds just the opposite. Today's the first night, we light 1. It was a miracle of 1, we light 1. The second night, miracle of 2, we light 2. And that's the general machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. There's a famous question that everybody knows, which is, why do we light 8, right? If the miracle was only seemingly 7, right? Because they found the Pach Shemen, right? The Pach Shemen was enough to burn for 1 day, burned for 8 days, right? So what is the reason? So we're going to get to that in a minute. Amar Ula says, there were 2 Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael that were arguing about this explanation. Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida. So Chad Omar, time of the Beis Shammai, getting into the Riza Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. The Riza Beis Shammai Keneged Yom HaNechnasin, it's because he would always look at the days that were coming in. The time of the Beis Hillel, the Riza Beis Hillel Keneged Yom HaYotzin, he looks at the days going out, which fits with what I just explained. The general looking at Beis Shammai always looks at the potential, and Beis Hillel looks at the actual. The Chad Omar, time of the Beis Shammai, the other guy, the other opinion, the other Amoira, doesn't say who held what. He held that Beis Shammai was going Keneged Parei HaChag, that just like on Sukkot when they slaughtered 70 Purim, and it started from the first day the most, and it decreased every single day. So too on Hanukkah we start with 8 and we reduce it. Keneged Parei HaChag. Why? I'm not really sure. The time of the Beis Hillel, the reason of the Beis Hillel, the Mailim B'Kodesh ve'ein Maridin, that you always have to go up in Kedusha and not down in Kedusha. Now, just, you might ask, what, does Beis Shammai not hold to the concept of Mailim B'Kodesh ve'ein Maridin? Certainly he does. But he would say that this is not considered Mailim B'Kodesh. Mailim B'Kodesh in general is that if you have something, let's say you have wood that you have a Aron Kodesh made out of, right? You're not allowed to take that wood and then build a shender out of it, because you're reducing the level of kedusha for it. But in this case, just because you're adding candles, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're being ma'iled b'kodesh. So that's what I heard would be a good explanation as to why Beis Shammai doesn't subscribe to this concept of ma'iled b'kodesh as it relates to the Hanukkah candles. Amar Rabba bar Barchana Amar Rav Yechanan, Shtei Zakenim Hayu B'Tzidan. There were 2 elders in the city of Sidon. Echad Asa K'Beis Shammai, Echad Asa K'Beis Hillel. One did like Beis Shammai, one did like Beis Hillel. Zenais and Talmud Barav. And this one gave an opinion that the reason why he held like Beis Shammai was Keneged Parei HaChag, because it was Keneged Parei HaChag. But Zenais and Talmud Barav, the Mailim B'Kodesh ve'ein Maridin. The reason why it was Mailim B'Kodesh v'lo Maridin, like the second set of reasons. Tan Rabbanan. Ner Chanukah mitzvah lahanicha al Pesach Beisai. the mitzvah of Hanukkah is to place the light by the door of one's house. Mibachutz, outside the house. Im haya dar ba'aliyah. If someone lived on the upper floor, manicha b'chaloin asmuch l'Rosh Hashanah. He puts it by the window, which is close to the Rosh Hashanah. B'shas sakana, at a time of danger, which is when the Jews lived in Babel or in Persia, it was a time of sakana, because if they lit the candles at that time, it was a non-Jewish festival, and you were only allowed to light fires if it was for their avodah zarah. And if they caught the Jews lighting the menorah or lighting any sort of fires that was not for their holiday, their festival, they would come and do damage to the Jews. So manicha al shulchanai v'dai, he puts it on his table, and that should be sufficient. And by the way, that's a halacha l'maisa today. I believe that we in America go along with the concept of shas hakana. That's why we do not put our menorah outside our house. Whereas in Eretz Yisrael, they still to this day light their menorah outside their house. One last thought, I'm going to finish the shiur right here. We'll pick it up from here tomorrow. Was that on this concept of the lighting the menorah for 8 days, and so the question is, well, what if the miracle was really only 7 days? Why do we light for 8 days? And this is a very, very famous question. There's actually a sefer where they wrote down answers to this question. They have over 100 answers. But one answer that I got from Rabbi Zions that he sent me last night, which was brought down from the Rebbe, which was that the oil, for oil to burn for 8 days, it has to be like some sort of special miracle oil, right? Because regular oil would only burn 1 day, right? Yet, there was the mitzvah of lighting the menorah was dafka from Shemen Zayah. By the way, I don't know why the screen shows Omri and not me, but I don't know if there's a way to switch that or not, it's fine. That the oil, the mitzvah of lighting the menorah was dafka Shemen Zayah, and not with some sort of miracle oil. So the miracle of the oil of Hanukkah is that it dafka was not miracle oil, it was olive oil. And that at the same time, while olive oil consumes gets consumed when it's burned, it was miraculously being consumed, and it was also like regenerating, so to speak. It was being burned and it was not being burned. And that's the real miracle, that even on the first day, this olive oil was functioning as real olive oil, but at the same time, it was not burning up. And this is a similar concept we know with the Aron Kodesh in the Kodesh Kodashim, right? That the Aron took up space, but it also did not take up space. Meaning, if you look if you measured from one side of the Aron to the wall, it was 10 amas. And the other side of the Aron to the other was 10 amas. We know the whole Kodesh Kodashim was only 20 amas. So what's the shot? It took up space, but it didn't take up space. And this is a similar concept to the oil, that the oil was being burned and it was also being regenerated simultaneously. So it was actually olive oil, and that was the miracle of the oil, and therefore that existed all 8 days, and that's why we light for 8 days. Shkoyach, guys, have a wonderful day. Wishing everyone a lot of atzlacha. Everyone should stay healthy, and in Mirza Hashem, hopefully soon we will have Rabbi Z back, and I can retire back to my position of just asking questions.
Shkoyach, Danny.
Shkoyach, Danny.
Very good. Beautiful.